for pre-construction work, so pole studies, engineering, high-level design. You've seen the side-by-side. So that passed the House, went to Senate Finance. Senate Finance had their own version. It looks like they've set that aside. That was the S-118, and instead have been rewriting H-360 with a strike all amendment, which means they put their own ideas in place of what was there. There's a new draft every day. Some of the key changes are, one of the big ones right now is that certain small private ISPs or telecoms, so like Franklin Telecom, for instance, or as of today, now Mansfield Fiber, could also apply directly for funds and not have to go through the CUD first. They must have a plan for universal service within their service area. It's not explained what happens when they don't have a service area. Like, it's pretty clear with Franklin Telephone. It's not when it comes to Mansfield Community Fiber. That's one of the major differences between the bills. It does still look like there's going to be $9 million for pre-construction available now through the end of the year through the department, and then through a board that's going to be within the department. And they're also looking to allocate several millions of dollars of funds for construction grants also for this year while the board gets set up. So
can I jump in with a question?
Please do.
Can you define small when you said at first the H30 was not only CUDs, and then you said it looks like some small ones like Franklin Telecom? Like, what defines small versus large?
A lot of times it's how it's regulated under law. So the small independent telephone companies are eligible. So that would be like Franklin Telephone, Waitsfield Champlain, for instance. The language they added today opens it up to small companies that are, I think they specified they're not operating in more than 3 counties. Let me see if I can pull up some of the other notes here today, but it was meant to be inclusive of companies like Mansfield Fiber, like probably Stowe Access or Stowe Cable, Duncan Cable, some of the smaller companies. It would not be open to a company such as Consolidated that holds such a market share.
So basically it's going to help out the mom and pops that can't afford to do the infrastructure but can provide the service. Is that what that's kind of like? They're trying to categorize. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, they're trying to make it inclusive for small companies that have already given a go at it. The big difference between the two bills is prior to the changes that the Senate's making right now, they would have to come to the CUD first. And they would have to show the CUD their plans. They would have to work with the CUD to figure out how those plans fit into the CUD's plans for universal service. So it changes the.
That is great.
That's what the original version was in 360. So that's
a good merger between the groups, though. When you're working with the small mom and pops, that's a good combination crossover. Just from working with them for decades, I think that is smart.
Yeah, no, I would agree that there is a place for the small telecoms in this. I have some concerns about coordination. That's what I've heard from some of the other CUDs, because you don't want a situation where you don't know what the other company is doing and are spending money on pre-construction or engineering or other costs that end up being like wasted or duplicative. So there's issues to work out. The bill is going to pass Senate Finance tomorrow. And then it's likely to end up in a conference committee, since there's 2 different versions of the bill now, and then get to the governor sometime in some form or another later this month. But regardless of which version passes, there's going to be quite a bit of funding in there for pre-construction and construction that's going to be open to the CUDs and partners of the CUDs. There's going to be additional technical assistance to help CUDs with negotiating partnerships, the legal expenses, the bond market. It's creating more of a centralized structure to be able to look at this from a statewide level of how this all fits together, with the goal of bringing as many addresses as possible to 100 by 100 is the standard. So at this point, only fiber qualifies for reaching that standard.
Is there an understanding in the Senate Finance Committee about the danger of balkanizing what we're doing? In other words, if we have, we already have the sort of the Comcast donut hole problem, and we had I'll call it a threat by MC to come into, in particular, our area, and whether we wanted them or not, and, to not provide universal service, cherry pick the more profitable stuff and go on their way. CUDs really only work if there's enough subscriber base to take care of the passing 2 homes per mile, balancing it out with the 20 homes per mile. If we chew this up into a bunch of little pieces, none of it will work. Is anybody kind of getting that message through in the Senate Finance Committee?
I'd like to think that's a question that they're grappling with. And the CUDs, if that's a concern of theirs, should certainly make the committee aware of that challenge, because it is a concern. Lack of coordination and not knowing what addresses you have. These addresses weren't served for a reason. There's also the challenge of defining what is a service area for a company that doesn't have, like a telephone company like Franklin, where their service area is. It's established and regulated, and if they want to, Franklin talks about there's 8 addresses they've been unable to reach so far with fiber. Well, that's great. Yeah. And I'm sure the CUD would also help them get to those addresses if it created a situation of universal service. It's more of a challenge when you have a company that their boundaries are, they're amorphous. It's like, is the boundary wherever they set their flag down is saying they're going to have a project? Like, there's so many details that need to be worked out. I don't know if that's going to be worked out within the committee or worked out within the board. But I know there's also a concern of some of the CUDs that by not having the CUDs as, I say gatekeeper, but that's not really the word. It's just a consulting partner. It reduces any incentive for those companies to partner more formally with the CUD for a more unified vision.
Yeah.
And it's like, I encourage you, if you have concerns on the legislation, make them known.
Second question, is there any motion towards sort of statewide technical standards for network design, reliability, interoperability, all those things? Or are we going to have a situation where in each CUD is going to hire one of 3 different engineering companies, and we'll have multiple different network topologies and solutions?
There's been quite a lot of discussion about it. I don't know if that's going to be defined in the legislation or left to the board. Oftentimes decisions like that are best dealt with and decided by people with the technical expertise, rather than legislators who are trying to balance many different pieces of knowledge and information coming from all directions. But that is a concern. I want to make sure that all these networks are redundant, are interoperable, and that it works, that it's not going to be a situation where you have VHS and Betamax, for instance.
God bless, Rob. You're talking to the choir on the technical side. Do not let the legislature make those decisions, because there are reasons why there's challenges in areas, and you got to do what you got to do, which is going to be different than if you have a regulatory over something, because you have to be unique in certain scenarios to make it happen.
Exactly.
CUD has begun having those conversations as well. The CUD Association has begun to have some of those chats. It's probably not as far as long as we probably would all like, but certainly there's an effort within the CUDs to have a common language, have a common network practices, certainly.
Yeah. And one thing I want to be clear of, there's not much I can do to stop something from happening with the legislature. That is up, just to be clear, that is up to you.
Rob, my other, I know we had briefly spoke earlier, but without providing opinion, can you mention the 2 potential support entities, one being public service and being propped up, and the other being not the VTA, but a broadband authority, right?
Sure. So the original bill, the H360 in the House, creates a Vermont Community Broadband Authority. In their version, I think it has a board of 7 or 8 people. That board would hire the executive director. It would be an independent agency, so it would have to figure out everything. It's creating a brand new organization. So it would be entirely independent, which has its benefits. Where things are at now in the Senate, and this was what the governor's proposal, it's modeled somewhat on the governor's proposal, was looking at where there's currently resources and giving more resources there, more capacity. So it would stay being housed at the Department of Public Service, but it would have independence. It would be based on a model that they have with the Clean Energy Development Fund, where there's a separate board and a separate director, but it can still use the resources and the institutional knowledge that exists. It's a model that based on the proposal put forth would be quicker to set up. It would have 3 board members. It may end up being more flexible, but it's not entirely independent. My position is going wherever they send it is what it comes down to. And as I said, this is going to conference committee, so they'll figure out if it's going to be either of those options or if it's going to be a third option, then who knows where they're going to send us. So.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions for Rob?
Yeah, will there be, I had 2 people call me who will not utilize 100 MPS, but they were wondering if there will be a financial aid to be able, for the underserved people who can't come up with maybe $100 a month. I think my wife and I pay $45 with GlobalNet for the lowest rung, and we don't really need to jump up $5 for something higher. There's other people who $50 is a lot per month. So has that been talked about at all for help for those people?
I believe there is subsidies to be set aside, at least in S118 there were. I don't know if that carried over. Dave, additionally, there's the FCC starting May 12th is going to have a federal program, $50 a month, I believe is what it is. As well as most providers, I'm not sure about Consolidated, but certainly Comcast, I think an effort of our CUD as well is making programs like Internet Essentials of what Comcast offers more knowledgeable. Just heard Randy Brock talk about this the other day on the news, that only like 10% of qualified premises actually, or households actually use that program. They purposely don't advertise it. They don't make it known. So there's programs that many companies already offer that people could take advantage of. I feel that we could, as a CUD, we could help, obviously, we want to try to build fiber, but certainly we can, make resources known. I did just share the FCC program on our Facebook. And then Rob, maybe you can clarify what, I know there was some discussions about creating some subsidies for broadband. I'm not sure if that's continuing on or not.
Sure. Well, first 2 points. For the standards, 100 by 100 capable technology. So there very well may be symmetrical plans that are lower than that and cheaper. That we want to be investing in technology that's future-proof, that can meet whatever the speed needs are 5-10 years from now, as opposed to having to be pulled out of the ground and just replaced entirely. In terms of the subsidy questions, late in the session, there were 2 different plans put forth. One by a nonprofit that's partly funded by EC Fiber, and then another that was Broadband for All, that was somehow linked with even providing Starlink hookups, and it was providing subsidies, it was providing a broadband core. It was something that had a lot of good ideas. Both of them have a lot of good ideas in it, but as of this afternoon, Senate Finance decided that there's a lot of good ideas in there, but for a program this size, we need more time to address it. So I don't want to say that they punted, but they are concerned about it. They are looking at the various options. It's something I fully expect to come back later on. There's a lot more knowledge that even the discussion has created, and just movement among different social service agencies to think about that. We need to be sharing more information about these broadband plans. Same within the CUDs. Even last year during the pandemic, several CUDs started up a clearinghouse of these resources and a hotline number where people could call to get connected with these programs to have the interim service. But at this point, it looks like Senate Finance, and anything can happen in conference, is focusing on building the infrastructure, providing the ability, the option to access it. But not providing any other subsidies at this point until we can work out some of the details, see how things go with the federal subsidy and with the different programs individual companies are offering. The last thing anyone wants to do is to create a brand new program that only has funding for a few years and then a giant cliff that you have to drop off and there's no funding available. So they're taking a more of a slow go approach is how I interpret what happened today. That interpretation could be entirely wrong tomorrow. Things change fast.
Final question, I promise. Has there been discussion of how this impacts telecommunications, regulated telecommunications? Because of course the broadband providers are eventually going to want to offer, telephone service, that sort of thing. And we have a situation apparently here in Montgomery where there is a old non-competition agreement which does not allow any entity other than Consolidated, is the sort of follow-on entity from TDS, I think. This is how I understand it, from offering telephone service. But yet the CUDs or whoever they partner with are going to be pressed to offer telephone service. It's a regulated service at some point.
Well, just to back up a little bit, there is in the state, there's incumbent telephone companies and there's competitive ones. ILECs and CLECs. Yes, that's what I was going for there. So when you're an ILEC, you have a territory it's your territory. You are offering the service there. That doesn't apply if you're offering voice over internet protocol, VoIP. Okay. Which is what as a CUD you would do. That is what happened a lot in the EC fiber territory is they built out broadband, then they offered a voice client. That's happening all over the place. So you'll still have the different incumbents. You'll still have even the cable companies that have, it's like, okay, well, Comcast has your town. And another company can apply for a CPG, but normally you don't compete. But there's nothing stopping you from offering an over-the-top television service as well if you need that in order to make the numbers work. So it's more of it's non-compete, but it's built into law from when all the telecoms were a monopoly. So before they broke up, like all the baby bells, I guess it's a little before my time in telecom policy. I apologize, but
but the ISPs that are operating over these fiber networks we're going to build will be able to offer VoIP then.
Yes.
Okay, answers the question.
It's a big selling point, actually.
And OTT.
Yeah.
Video services.
Yep. SD-WAN. Not that that's my gig or anything right now.
Any other questions or concerns or ideas? How are things going? How are you feeling about this all? How are Sean and Emily and everybody keeping you engaged?
We are receiving outstanding support from Northwest Regional Planning. Beyond expectations.
Glad to hear it. Well, one other thing I didn't mention that I should probably tell you is there is more funding on the way. One thing that passed, and this was H315, was $1.6 million for pre-construction and capacity grants. This is through the American Rescue Plan. So we have this situation where we have this money, we have this program ready to go, but we don't have the guidelines for exactly what the feds allow us to use it for. Those guidelines are due at the latest a week from today. So that is going to be something that, as I said, this is pre-construction or capacity. It's a very wide definition. So to be able to provide some interim support for the CUDs, provide help with planning. That planning could be anything from from poll studies to high-level design to engineering, legal expenses, what you need to really accelerate your efforts and get moving on this. So I know lack of
Rob,
resources has been a big issue.
you anticipate this is going to be the same as the CARES funding, where in addition to the federal guidance, there'll be a separate state review process, like how we had Guidehouse? Or is that going to be different?
Oh, I know the answer I want to give. I want it to be different and I want it to be streamlined, but I don't have information on what the process is going to be or whether there is going to be a process. From reading the language in the America Rescue Plan, it's pretty clear that broadband is an eligible expense. On any of the calls that I've been on discussing what these guidelines could be or how they're interpreting deploying broadband infrastructure, it's a very open definition of what qualifies. I don't think it's going to be as much of an issue as it was with the CRF funds. Crossing my fingers on that at least. The one other piece of funding that's going to soon become available is the department received a grant from the Northern Borders Regional Commission. This grant is used to help a CUD with the community contribution portion of what you need to apply for a VEDA loan. So these are $400,000 grants that they have to be paired with financing, whether it's from VEDA or somebody else, to allow you to leverage additional funds. That is going to be reviewed by joint fiscal with a decision probably coming by the middle of the month at the latest. So those funds will be available. The third piece that's going to be available, once again, it's Northern Borders when it's approved by joint fiscal, is we're still figuring out the exact name on it, but it's the idea that we want to see what happens when you give a larger chunk of money to a CUD that's partnering with an ISP. So this is a $1.2 million grant. It's going to be one grant open to one CUD or two CUDs if you're working together. That'll be judged based on the amount of money leveraged, the number of addresses served, how it fits into your overall plan. So there's funding coming, just not fast enough, and it very well may go from famine to feast quite quickly. Great.
Last call for Rob. Okay, well,
Great.
we appreciate you being here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Rob.
Thanks for everything y'all are doing. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
Rob.
Reach out
Rob,
if you need anything.
Thanks, Rob.
Rob will
Bye,
probably text me at 8 a.m. again tomorrow.
I'm going to try not to. I'm going to do my best. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Rob. Approval of minutes. Let's jump right into our regular agenda now. Has everyone had an opportunity to review them? Are there any changes or alterations needed to be made? If none, I'll hear a motion to accept the minutes.
Motion to accept the minutes.
I second.
Second that.
Motion to accept the minutes made by Brenda, seconded by Charon. Am I saying this right? I always mess it up, don't I?
I'm not picky,
Sharon.
don't worry about it.
Charon, is that right?
It's a soft, kind of an SH sound, but yeah, Sharon.
Sharon, got it. Any further discussion?
I did actually have a change to suggest. I finally found it. On page 2, line 8, it's an awkward wording. E. McGinley noted that there was a response letter in BT Digger to the McNulty's article, which was critical of CUDs. So the response letter was not critical of CUDs. McNulty's article is critical of CUDs, but it doesn't read that way.
Yeah.
Just change the wording on that to something, the McNulty article that was critical of CUDs, just to make it clear. So the response letter was not critical.
All right. Emily, you have that captured?
Yep.
Thank you. Are we still good? Brenda? Sharon? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Treasurer's report. Emily.
Great, I'm gonna pull it up now. There's one additional bill that's new. There's no disbursements. What happened was the same thing that had previously happened with our Facebook. The CUD's Facebook account happened with the Google Workspace account, which is that the bank flags multiple transactions from an online vendor as fraudulent, and there is no good way to solve this other than manually approving every single transaction. So we use the same system we used before, where Nrpc used our bank account to pay for it, and then we will invoice it back to the CUD. So that is ongoing bank frustration. That's the new bill. Other than that, there have not been any changes. The amount in the People's Trust bank account is $58,173.05. And Sean, I'm not sure if you've heard from Rob yet with the official go ahead on the CUD planning, COVID planning grant funds yet. I know we've been waiting for that.
I haven't gotten, you may need to check with them. I kind of got a verbal, and I did finally talk to Alex at Nrpc today regarding our, you guys heard Rob mention at the clearinghouse platform that we approved back in the fall that nothing really ever happened to it. And then the grant timeline ran out and we weren't really sure what to do with the remaining funds. So he's aware of that. Rob's aware. We're just maybe just check with him. I don't know if you can get him to, I think maybe that he was just waiting on some sort of documentation to just absolutely confirm it, but he said it's a go. So I talked to Nrpc today and basically getting that project back and going, and they as well admittedly were like, yeah, like, we're just as guilty of kind of letting this kind of slide as well. So we'll get that project back and running. Again, not sure how beneficial the whole project will be, but it's committed funds that we committed with our COVID planning grant. And I had bluntly asked the question of like, well, like they haven't really done anything with us, and this was months ago, can we reallocate those dollars to something more useful? But I guess because it was committed and the timeline ran out, we are committed to that project. So we need to work with them to make that happen. So I contacted them today, and we're back in contact. We'll get that project going. That's the $12,500 project that we were previously committed to back in the fall.
Yeah, and as soon as I get the written commitment from Rob, all of these bills present, except for the Google Workspace, which is under, I believe, the $50 limit we set, which just needs chair approval, are previously approved by the board. So we will begin paying out all of those bills to present from that fund.
Any other questions on Treasurer's report? I'll entertain a motion to accept the report.
So
Move to accept the Treasurer's report.
I believe Everett made the motion, seconded by Jake, maybe? Was it Jake or JR? Not sure.
It was Jake.
Jake, there he is. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
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 Any opposed?
I'd like to offer a belated aye.
I'm right there with you, Sharon. Sharon, I had to kill my video. Okay. Subcommittee updates. I believe we are now all scheduled. Emily, do you have those dates? I don't have
Yes, there are 3 meetings. Let me pull up my calendar. I believe I have them on there. First is communications, which is going to be Thursday at 6 p.m.
This Thursday, correct?
This Thursday, yes. PMO, which is going to be this next Tuesday after the organizational meeting at 7. And then there is finance, who I don't have on my calendar yet, but I know Sean sent me the time today. Wednesday at the 12th at 6 p.m.
Okay. I think the two important items out of that is, appointing a lead for each one of those groups. That an objective out of those first meetings, appointing the lead to report back to the general board here, as well as identifying objectives and what those groups need to accomplish and what tasks they should take on immediately. I think that those are the items that need to be addressed first. Yeah. So those are scheduled. Good. Any other discussion needed on subcommittees at this time? Okay. CUD representative resolutions, upcoming organizational meeting. Emily just mentioned it next week. It's kind of a weird, we're going to kind of have 3 meetings here in a row, but this is, I guess by
Yes.
law, we have to have the meeting on the 11th.
Yes.
So our organizational meeting, which hopefully will be quick, will be next Tuesday at on the 11th at 6 p.m. If you have not already had your community or your local board submit the resolution for appointing you the representative, please get those submitted to Emily and Sean, please.
Yes, I have resolutions from Fairfax, Fairfield, Georgia, and Sheldon. So if your name's not on that list and if you sent it to Sean, let me know. Otherwise, make sure if you get that before Tuesday.
You don't have Montgomery?
I don't believe so. I can double check to make sure I didn't miss it. I was going through my
'Cause
email earlier.
I know they did it.
Okay.
I'll follow up with Charlie on that.
Okay, great.
Emily, I may have sent you the one for last year that had my
Okay.
name on it. And it did go to your email. I believe that was all I had. I do have the new one and I can get it updated, but we're meeting on Monday. So I can do that for you and get the new one to you with both.
Great, thank you.
With myself and Heather on it. Thanks.
That'll be great.
Any other discussion on item number 6, CUD representative resolutions? Number 7, potential compensation for chair and vice chair. I'm rightfully exempt from this conversation, so I'm not sure this was added on the agenda and I'm unaware, so.
Yeah, so Sean and I had put this on the agenda with the intention of having the CUD have a discussion about whether most select boards and some other boards provide compensation for the chair and sometimes vice chair for the time that they put in. I believe typically in the region, select board members sometimes around like $750. So I wanted to open that up to discussion for the CUD. Prior to the organizational meeting while you'll be re-voting.
It's a stipend. Those guys do a lot of work, speaking on someone who's been chair and vice chair, who's never gotten a stipend.
Do we know what the range is in the other CUDs?
I'm not aware, and I'm not sure. We could ask around. I know of CUDs, there are several who stipend their treasurers or members of the CUD, and I don't know about other executive positions.
Can we, is the intention, Emily, to have a vote tonight, a motion on it?
I think it's up to the CUD. It's just something to bring up before the organizational meeting, I guess.
Yeah, I think that'd be a reorg thing that we would talk about next week, right? Just to get us thinking about it now.
Oh, okay.
My question is, do we have funds that we can use for that expense, that are approved for that expense?
You have the VCF fund, so those are capacity building, so that could potentially fit within that. And so that would be one potential area, is you have that, I think it's $20,000 or so currently. of 30.
While I'm exempt from any decision on this, I'm right with Tara. When I saw this on here, my gut feeling was that, certainly, if it's a common thing, with other CUDs and other boards to provide some form of stipend, that's understandable. But I feel for us, until we have the financial foundation to hire a program manager and some staff, possibly that might have to come at a later time. That was my gut feeling when I saw this on the those funds may be better served seeking staff and administrator that can help us with the day-to-day.
Well, for what it's worth, I mean, I think in concept, I think it's totally appropriate. I know that it's been my experience on this board that our current chair and our past chair put in an exorbitant, and I feel fortunate, amount of time. and I know that this isn't meant to be any kind of compensation, but in concept, I am, for one, all for it. I mean, I think it's just a nice way to say thanks for going above and beyond and being the glue that keeps this all together.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll table this until next Tuesday's meeting then. Is that agreed?
Sounds good.
Okay. Legislative update, we kind of already covered that, so we'll move on. Member updates. Ken, how's Allberg? You have a meeting coming up soon, don't you?
Yeah, so apologies for those of you who tried to attend the meeting last week. It was canceled a few hours prior, and so apologies for that. There's a meeting, a select board meeting, and the matrix presentation and Q&A is in theory at the top of that meeting at 7 o'clock. That's tomorrow. And then there's an informational meeting that is not part of the select board meeting next, or on May 10th, the day before the town vote. And that will also be at 7 o'clock. And there should be information to attend those meetings on the town of Alberg's website. And I guess I should have mentioned this probably in the previous conversation with reps and alts, but tomorrow night, in theory, I should be getting from the select board, and I can forward it then to you, Emily, the resolution for the town. And JR, I know you're attending tonight, but probably on behalf of NWATV, but JR is not going to be put forward as an alt for the town, but he is being put forward tonight as the rep for the village. So he's moving up from AAA to the majors.
Does the village have the resolution to join?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And that's it.
Dave or Mary Kay, one or the other.
I have nothing to add. Go ahead, Mary Kay, if you do.
I have nothing new to add for excitement over in this corner of the house.
Sharon?
I know that the Richford Select Board had a meeting last night. I have not seen the minutes on that. I'm hoping that they have done the resolution. Friday is my last day working for the town as an economic development coordinator, but I've told them that I'd like to stay on as a volunteer here. I want to make sure that there's always a quorum, and they've agreed to that. So that's my update.
Thank you.
Brenda? Still muted, Brenda.
we did meet with the select board at the regularly scheduled meeting week ago yesterday. They did pass a resolution to reappoint Heather as the lead and me as the second for Bakersfield. That paperwork is pending to Emily because I had the old form. I had last year's form. So I want to get the new one in as well. And as far as other business, that's it.
Heather, anything to add?
No, I actually was out fully vaccinated, but in Florida for the last 2 to 3 weeks. So Brenda was the sole taking care of Bakersfield. Thank you, Brenda. So I'm still catching up.
Thank you, Heather.
Tara.
No, still the same, starving pockets for broadband in Georgia.
Thanks, Tara. Jacob, what's the score of the game?
It is still 0-0. It's a nail biter against St. Albans.
Any updates?
No updates from Sheldon at this point.
Thanks, man. Everett.
Nothing new in Montgomery. The select board did reappoint me. Nice. That's what it says in the minutes, and I have sent an email to them to ask them to send the resolution back to Emily.
Thank you. And Enosburg, nothing. Nothing really new. I have a million other projects, Vital Village, and all the other things that are happening here. So, but other than that, nothing, no big updates. Emily, anything to share?
I don't think so. Aside from the feasibility study, we did get our draft, and I know that's on the agenda. So we'll talk about that. I don't think I have anything else.
Okay. Let's jump into feasibility. We did receive our feasibility. We need to review it. I feel that that is a perfect first task for PMO. We need to, even though we kind of asked for a private or a confidential version and then a public version with some information that may be sensitive redacted. We don't appear to have gotten that. So I think the PMO subcommittee should review that and take a look and redact any private information that we feel that might put us at a disadvantage to potential private entities. That's something that we literally just got it. So I did ask Sean to relocate that so it's easier to access for those members as well as myself. So it's within our cloud now, which is helpful. But we have it. We need to review it before we make any decisions. I know that we've had prior discussions about the feasibility, about next phases for business planning, but we need to review this. We need to make it public, but we certainly need to review it and identify any sensitive information that might be in there that we feel might put us at a disadvantage. Does that sound reasonable, PMO folks?
Indeed.
I'll do my best.
And just as kind of
Go ahead, Emily.
an update of where we are with NRPC, we've received the draft. We're waiting on a final draft still with a few additional details, and then it needs to be reviewed and approved by DPS. That's sort of the next phase in the process.
And we, as a option, let me look at this again here. As a option, hold on one second. I got this email today. VCF has some funds available should we seek independent third party to review it. Vermont Community Foundation. They have funds set aside. I through conversation today discovered that, so that's an option for us should we seek a professional consultant to review this as an independent third party. The PSD also require, they will also do that as well, but this is like a whole nother option for us to do that. So But let's mark that as item number 1 for PMO next week. Agreed?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Other business. Does anyone have any other business?
Should we begin to think about meeting in person at some point?
I would say I'm not yet fully vaccinated. For me, Everett, with me having 2 very young children, that's a concern still.
Yeah.
We have an infant. So I would certainly at some point, I think that's a great idea. It's just a matter of, at what point of, what percentage of immunity or herd immunity do we say, yeah, that makes sense, right? I don't know what the governor's restrictions are now. I know that the town the Enosburg Select Board has gone back to hybrid meetings versus full virtual. The select board meets, but they only allow the public to chime in virtually. But certainly, I entertain that idea, but just at what point? And certainly I want to be fully vaccinated by the time that, before I join a in-person
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah. I mean, we could set that as ground rules that all must be fully vaccinated. There's no rush particularly, give it a couple months.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah, I
be
believe
honest, time is of precious for me right now in my work time and coordinating to dedicate here for this time and expectations that are going to be coming up. So driving back and forth for an hour of my time is precious. So as much as I can zoom in, I'm going to zoom in because I'm trying to meet all kinds of check marks.
I feel strongly about, I was pushing for hybrid virtual meetings long before a pandemic hit in Enosburg. So, and that was just for community participation. So I think we should always have this as an option. It shouldn't be one or the other.
As somebody
Brenda?
checking in from the ball game, I would agree with that. I mean,
Yep.
I wanted
Brenda?
to participate, obviously, but I also just got to see my son hit a stand-up double, and I hate to miss out on that too.
Here we go. Scoring position. Like it.
My last
Where-
meeting was during a lacrosse game, so I get it.
Brenda, you had a comment?
Yeah. I'm
oh.
sorry. Go ahead, John.
Oh, thank you, Brenda. Where are the meetings generally located when they're in person?
We've never had one.
Oh,
We were created in the midst of a pandemic, so we've never had one.
okay. Thank you.
Nrpc tends to move their meetings around, but they tend to trend towards the St. Albans, Swanton type area, just because it's sort of central and also there are large meeting spaces there.
Yeah, Georgia, we have room too. We're not too bad as far as centrally located.
I just want to figure out if you're all avatars or real people.
I'm trying to save your bandwidth, Everett, hence the picture.
Brenda.
All right. I would like to say that the board, with my select board with investment in the equipment and the time that we put in doing this, is going to maintain a hybrid where we will meet in person and invite members of the community to join us via video, but they will always be open once meeting restrictions are fully lifted. So we'll do that. I also wanted to ask if it would be okay if I slid into Dominic DeRosa's spot on the committee that he was part of. That was the P.E.G committee, I believe.
Project management?
PMO, yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Project
yes.
management. Okay, I would like to do that.
Yes.
I'd like to slide
Okay.
into that as well. If you would send me or forward me whatever information I need, Emily, that would be
Yeah, I'll
great.
forward you the Zoom meeting link.
Has anybody else not had an opportunity to put their name for a subcommittee if interested? I can't recall Jake or Heather.
Yeah, it's and Tara, and I still got to reach out to you, Sean. I'll call you this week.
Yep, that's fine.
I think
Kevin.
I'm on the finance committee, right?
I think that's what you said before you went on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure you get that email, Ben.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other business before I go?
Just an FYI for you, Sean, this is off topic, but the pre-order for Starlink doesn't matter. If it's open in your cell, you can just buy it. I've signed up about 6 people in the Sheldon Enosburg area.
Yep.
Since I got my email last week.
Same. Yeah, I did. I got the email. I have mine ordered. I'm cautiously optimistic, but we'll see. I may maintain consolidated for some time just to have redundancy. To I've heard horror stories, and then I've heard positive stories as well. So I'm hopeful that it provides a better quality of service. But I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
When is it coming out to our area?
My order said 2 weeks.
You're kidding.
It says 2 to 3 weeks, but if you look inside your account, it actually, my ship date says June 1 to June 7.
Wow.
Okay.
And just to boast a little bit, I was down and watched the rocket that Elon Musk sent up with those in there. So I had some pretty cool times down there. And not to mention the last shuttle that just left. So it was cool.
Yeah. You went on vacation for 3 weeks. We all know.
I had a purpose. My mom had a heart attack, so I had to go down and.
I know, sweetie. I know. And I just so you guys all know, her brother-in-law and I are like, he's like a brother from another mother. So
yeah,
I know she was gone. I know they were taking care of the dog. I had to text and make sure they remembered one day when I had the kids that they took care of the dog. So.
Oh, thank you. Yes, no accidents. That was a plus.
Yes. So yes, that's why I'm picking.
None that you found, Heather. None that you found.
What was that?
None that you found. Accidents.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she might have. Well, we won't talk about bad dog mannerisms.
Anybody else?
No Starlink invitations over on the eastern end of Franklin County yet, unfortunately.
Well, mine doesn't work ever. You can have mine.
Yeah, it stretches as far as East Enosburg. It just missed Montgomery. I signed up 2 people in Cold Hollow around Horseshoe Circle and Carpenter Road.
Nice.
So it's just on this side of Enosburg Mountain.
Yeah.
I did want to mention, for those who might have caught it, who might have read the Messenger this past week, Christine Hallquist Q&A. Was there anybody that had an opportunity to read that article? No.
Is it worth reading?
Well, I did send a response. I felt that in general it was positive and insightful. However, there were some comments made about Northwest that were less than flattering. There were some frustrating things, and I made a point to respond to NEK's chair, and Christine and I had a long chat. If you do read it, I'm sure you'll understand, but she did offer to come and apologize to the board this evening. I told her that was unnecessary after our conversation, but there were some misleading and kind of presumptive comments made that were a little frustrating, especially at a time when we're all putting together a unified CUD front across the state, and we're trying to collaborate and trying to do all the right things. So it was
maybe experiencing growing pains that they've already been through and forgotten by now.
Yeah, I mean, legitimately, we are 18 months behind NEK. We're probably 6 months behind Lamoille. I mean, we are the newest of all the CUDs. We certainly have had our own issues with delays with feasibility and frustrations with at the end of the year, our COVID planning grant stuff. Emily's fully aware of that process. Certainly, and we quite literally started with nothing. On I think our first meeting, we might have had 3-4 individuals, whereas many of the other organizations, other CUDs, had a grassroots broadband effort for several years before they were created into a CUD, NEK and Lamoille included. So I kind of stepped up and defended our honor somewhat and just kind of said, hey, you're not, these comments were taken personally. And so if you get an opportunity, generally it was worth a read. It was in the St. Albans Messenger, but you know, there were some comments made in there that were a little frustrating from my standpoint, you know, knowing how much we put into this and how much effort and how much we all care. There were some things that were said that I was like, that's not accurate. Or they were kind of presumptive that I was like, okay. So I felt it was needed to respond. We did get some apologies, and I think there's an understanding now of kind of where we stand as well, as far as our progress and what's happening with Northwest. So I wanted to make that aware.
Where and when did this appear?
A few days back, maybe Friday, in the Messenger.
Okay.
So did she write, is it a letter to the editor or?
It was a Q&A.
Q&A, okay.
Yeah, it was a Q&A with the article's Q&A with Christine Hallquist. You know, again, it was generally positive. It was insightful. It was, you know, pro CUD, pro broadband, but there were some comments made that were a little questionable that I felt were a little, you know, subtle slights at kind of our efforts. And I was like, okay, well, that was kind of unnecessary. So I took a point to reach out, and they understood it from our standpoint after I had those discussions. So I wanted to let the board know that. Any other discussion tonight?
I would like to bring up, you know, from what Rob Fish said about the change to the bill in the Senate Finance Committee or over in the Senate. Do we want to put together a letter that can be emailed to the chair of that committee stating what we think the issues would be if these legally categorized small companies are not required to partner with the CUDs? And, you know, that whole discussion about the kind of complications that can happen if the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing, and how that can create gaps and complications or redundancies.
I mean, we certainly can. I don't ever, you had drafted a letter, and much of the context of that from a week or two ago were relayed to Randy Brock.
Did it include that kind of information about the?
Well, that's a specific change. You know, I will say that VCUDA, the organization, I mean, they've kind of identified a few spokesmen that quite consistently testify. I mean, the CUDs as a whole, you know, under VCUDA have. I mean, we certainly can submit testimony as well, but you know, I think the collective voice of VCUDA now is very strongly advocating for a certain avenue. I mean, we certainly would like even, you know, any private entity to collaborate and work directly with the CUDs. But I think there's, you know, there certainly from my view, if that's the case, I mean, from what has been proposed, it's a win. I mean, you know, they were looking to gut potential funding for CUDs and you know, S118 at one point, where, you know, a lot of funds could have potentially been made available directly to Comcast Consolidated. You know, certainly I'm not opposed to the potential of, you know, small telecoms working with us. But, you know, if that's the compromise where there could be, you know, there's funds made available. I mean, you know, from what was proposed, you know, I think they're trying to find that middle ground of all CUD, or, you know, the proposal was the CUDs were going to get, you know, marginally what was originally submitted.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more in terms of partnering in order to avoid those gaps or redundancies and be inefficient and waste money. And I don't know if there's a way to voice that. And also, how many CUDs are not part of VCUDA?
None at this point.
So we're not, did we join?
We are.
Oh, okay. So we don't need, I'm sorry.
That was last month.
Okay. I forgot that. So this is sort of moot because we are already wrapped into that voice. Okay, great.
Yep.
Thank you.
So if I can chime in just for a second, I think that with VCUDA, we're coverage, we're territorial. We're gonna have to work on that communication structure,
Mhm.
regulatory, as a whole, as not just Northwest CUD, but all of them together. Being a project manager in telecom, this is my life. So just because they're different clients and different pieces doesn't mean you can't put them all together and make it work.
Mhm.
So I don't want people to think that is so much more difficult the way it is. This is actually a good thing because people are going to be focused and experts in their area. And as long as you can keep the communication between all the CUDs working, you can actually get a lot of stuff done by give and take, especially on the border areas and such. So there's a lot of communication that will happen in order to say, we find that we're going to phase something and it's near a border. Well, that's when you're going to seriously work with a specific CUD to help make that work both ways, right? We want to save, we're in it for the underserved. We're not in it for the almighty dollar. So our goals are separate than the private sector. So I think these are all good things for a lot of reasons. And I don't want people to get overwhelmed thinking that this is going to be hard to talk with the others because it's normal. Sean, do you disagree?
Nope. Right there with you.
Okay. Okay. Thank
But
you.
isn't this like the decision that they're making in the state to say that they're working with small and the CUDs for these communities that haven't gotten on board yet? Because they'll continue to be the same thing, just businesses that are looking to where they can make the most money and not go to the underserved. So, I mean, it's a good selling point for us to get these other towns that we haven't been able to get yet, especially if that passes.
I was surprised to hear, not surprised. So the S118 basically was, let's give the money to private ISPs without guardrails. Very much. I mean, that's unfortunately what our own senator was kind of advocating for as well, which was kind of frustrating. There weren't standards and there weren't benchmarks that they needed to hit. They weren't going to require 100 over 100. I mean, they had days of debates over those standards. Do private ISPs, should we require them to meet 100 over 100? Should we require them to provide universal access? Should we require them to prioritize underserved? I mean, so it sounds like those are baked into this, but they're allowing small telcos to access those funds if they meet similar standards that the CUDs stand on, without having to work directly through the CUDs. That was my take on what Rob Relay does.
Yes, and that's my understanding from what I read as well. And what the change was yesterday was originally they were only looking at the regulated incumbents, so a small regulated incumbent like Franklin Telephone, but they included it to also include small ISPs that are not incumbents, so like MC. So that's a change.
Any other discussion this evening? Going once, going twice.
Motion to adjourn, Sean.
I'll second that.
Motion to adjourn made by Brenda, seconded by Jake. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by stating aye.
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 Very informative meeting. Thank you.
Adjourned. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your
Thank
time.
you. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.